Here we go.
Fantastic.
We had some technical problems, but we've got it all worked out now. Welcome everyone to the Melbourne Traditionalists podcast, episode 2. And I'm Mark Moncrieff from the Melbourne Traditionalists, and I have with me David Hiscox from XYZ. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So you were telling me before about corporal punishment and music lessons.
Yeah, something along the lines of if you miss that B flat one more time, you'll get a punch in the face.
So it's quite harsh, corporal punishment.
Yeah, I don't know how successful that'll be. To be honest, I get good results from being very clear about what's right and wrong, but being very kind about it. So,
so it's more a fantasy than reality.
Oh, maybe you can use it as a threat just for those who need it. We'll see.
All right, yeah, I agree. Some people do need that threat, don't they?
Yeah.
Now, you had a topic that you wanted to talk about.
Oh, well, yeah, last week or the week before, it was NIDOC week. And so naturally that means that every corporation and their dog has to virtue signal about Aboriginal issues.
Yes.
Yeah. I noticed when I went on the ABC website last week, I was just trying to see what was trending and write about it. And typing in the ABC, like the actual ABC URL, just took me as by default to a thing where it was all just their NIDOC page. So it was Aboriginal issues, the entire thing. And you actually had to press a special button to get to the news. And then the documentary about Adam Goodes came out.
Yes.
Basically trying to reframe the booing that happened of him.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, I'm sure most people do, but for most people, some people who may not know, Adam Goodes is an Aboriginal who played over 300 games of
something like 370.
AFL. Yeah, 370
great player.
games.
Actually, great player.
Australian rules football. And then somewhere about the 300 mark, he started to be booed. And he said, and the AFL and various media commentators said, it's because he's Aboriginal.
Yeah.
But most people contend it's because as he got older, he became a dirty player.
Yeah. There's footage of him actually tripping Gibson for Hawthorn.
All right.
Yeah. I if it took a little bit of digging because YouTube like to hide that sort of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Eventually you find it. There's footage of him going for the ball. Gibson's going for the ball. Adam Goodes literally just puts his foot out, trips him. Yeah.
And in fact, it was a sad end to the career. That, as you said, he actually was a champion.
Yes.
And he pulled these tricks and ruined his reputation.
Yeah, well, there was that. He became a dirty player. And there was the incident where a 13-year-old girl allegedly called him an ape, and so he pointed her out and got her kicked out. And it was a big public humiliation. He called her the face of racism in Australia.
Yes. The 13-year-old girls are that.
Yeah. I've never been too hard on that. At the time, she may not have looked 13 when she actually said it, like in the heat of the moment. But then afterwards, it was there was no quarter given basically.
Yeah.
He was named Australian of the Year.
That's right, because of this controversy.
Yes.
Even though that was constantly denied.
Yeah. And he made a point of reminding us of stating to us British Australians.
Yeah.
Just remember whose land you're on.
Yeah.
If that isn't a statement of this is not your land, this is our land, we're taking over, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And he did that so-called Aboriginal war dance when he kicked a goal at the Carlton place.
Oh, that's right.
It's a very aggressive behaviour.
It was. It was directed towards the fans.
Yes.
Not towards another player or.
Yeah. And players get fined for giving the bird to the crowd. This was a direct. It was violent.
Yeah.
You could say that it's even inciting violence. But people were like, oh no, it's part of his culture, it's really brave, he's standing up to racism. And so, yeah, he got booed all the way through the last few years of his career.
Yeah.
And the AFL went into full nanny corporation mode to try to stop it. It was full on, and in the media it was full on as well. And it was made absolutely clear right from the start that it was racism and we shouldn't do it. And they tried various ways to stop it. But what's interesting about the narrative that's getting spun now is the AFL are trying to say, we didn't do enough at the time.
Which is quite bizarre, isn't it?
It's really bizarre. There was even a statement from the AFL's General Manager of Diversity. I just find that title so Orwellian. She says that they got bogged down in trying to have a conversation about whether or not it was racism rather than just calling it out as racism. It's like, no, you said it was racism. People opposed you, that you were like, no, it's racism.
That's right.
You got to stop it. So this is how the left operates, and this is how conservatives lose, because we jump up and down and kick up a stink about it, but they control the narrative. Like this is 5 years later, they're saying, this is how it was, the conversation is over, it was racism, and there's nothing that we can do about it.
Well, I'm not sure whether I agree there,
Yeah.
because yes, the AFL and the left certainly do pull this trick where they say, hey, this is absolute, there's no question, blah, blah, blah. But there's a reason why they keep saying it. It's because people aren't listening.
That's true, yeah.
And certainly with the Adam Goods saga, as it has become, he keeps bringing up this issue, and the AFL keeps coming back to it, and they keep coming back to it because the rest of the people are saying, no, that's rubbish, that's nonsense, that's not true.
I'll pay that.
So they just keep reiterating this, hoping that this time everyone will shut up.
Yes.
But actually, every time they've raised the issue, it's really got people's blood boiling again. Because people remember, hey, you're the ones who took this out of control, not us. And of course, now this season, they've had the behaviour awareness officers.
Yes, another Orwellian title.
Well, exactly. And we had that quite interesting scene with the Indian security guard racing onto the field in Hobart to try and separate two players who were wrestling over the ball.
Yeah.
And the umpire was very stern. No, get off. It's incredible. It's hilarious in a way. But this is where the game is, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting, the distinction that you make. I guess you can make the argument that the left keep pushing the laws, and like the left keep losing in terms of like the political battle. But in terms of hearts and minds, people are still where we were 20 years ago, when Pauline Hanson got it, say, 1 million votes or something. That hasn't changed, and people's bullshit meter is still well and truly working, basically.
It's working in some areas and totally defective in others.
Yes.
But the other issue is that people want to be respected, and when you're constantly told, oh, you're not allowed to have that opinion because you're a racist, people go, well, I'm not being respected. I still keep my beliefs, but I'm not gonna say things, and I think that's a big mistake on people's parts. I think that I'm going to be silent.
Yes.
Because the other temptation is always to be, well, if you're going to call me a Nazi or a racist or whatever, then I'm going to be that.
Yes.
And I think that actually plays into their hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
On one side you got people know what they can and can't say in public, and so we self-censor, and then yes, people get radicalized. I've got to say it's important that people get immune to the charge of being called a racist.
Yes.
Like that's the really vital thing here, and it's I've argued it in a couple of different articles, both with the behavioural awareness officers and Jeff Kennett's response to that.
He came out and he said, it's because these people aren't Australian, they're foreigners.
Yes.
And the next day he came out and said, I misspoke. And
yeah. Well, it's like you could see the back down coming in the way that he used his language when he did the original criticism. Because he said, he didn't really, he said, it looks like they're not Australian, so at first we think, great, he's talking about race. But he wasn't really, he was talking about culture. He said, maybe they don't understand our culture.
Yeah.
So he made it about culture rather than about race.
Yeah.
He's sort of leaving open the caveat, look, anybody from anywhere in the world can come to Australia and be an Australian as long as they respect our values and understand our culture, and assimilate and fit in and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. It's a similar thing with what's going on with Adam Goodes, where people are jumping up and going down, no, the booing's not racist. It's true, but they're leaving, at least publicly, from what I can see, they're leaving the concept of racism unchallenged. Like, racism is a word invented by communists in order to undermine formerly homogenous European countries.
Yes.
And it's the whole narrative that we've had since the 20th century is that we're not allowed to base our countries on the idea that we're one people.
Yes.
And that's the whole point of racism. That word is used as a psychological trick. It's used as a psychological barrier from us understanding the truth and actually standing up and actually challenging the left on what they really want to do.
Now, David, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Have you read my article, How Big a Problem is Racism?
No, I haven't.
I knew it. He's such a bad boy. Now, there was an article in the paper, was it last week or the week before, about how the Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commissioner in Victoria was getting together with local councils to encourage them to get people to report incidents of racism. Right, so
dobbing
people in. So the basic idea was that not enough people are reporting racism to the Commission. So what they have to do is people, they're racially abused or whatever, and they don't know what to do because apparently they don't have any community organisations that can help them. That was irony, sarcasm, I should say. So they have to go to local council, and the local council will give them a form and they can fill it in and send it into the Commission. Now, last year there were 188 cases reported to the Commission.
Wow. That
wasn't 188,000, that was 188. That's 12 less than 200.
Yes, right.
Just to clarify exactly.
Yeah, in a population of 20 million.
Well, in Victoria, so 6 million in Victoria.
Okay, yeah.
And that was after an increase over previous years.
Oh, right, okay.
So in the years before...
30 per 1 million, that's 3 per 100,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a pretty low rate of racism.
It's it's astonishing.
No wonder they want to encourage it.
Well, exactly. Well, I mean, it's the same old story, isn't it? There just aren't enough of us Nazi racist bigots to go round.
Yes, they've got to. They need some kind of statistics to justify this hysteria over the racism crisis in Australia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we're constantly told how racist we are and so forth. And 1/3 of people in Australia were born outside of Australia.
Yeah.
How can that be if we're such xenophobes, and why would they want to be here?
Absolutely. Yeah. And statistically, it's quite possible that of those 3 people per 100,000 who do reportable offences of racism, it's quite possible that one of those people, of those 3, is not from Australia.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they just need to be educated. They need the same education that we Australians need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not enough.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, if just because you're racially abused doesn't mean that it's one of us.
Mm.
It could be. I've heard people of similar backgrounds call each other racist names.
Yes.
You know. So it's certainly not something that's restricted to one group of people.
Absolutely.
As we're told.
Absolutely. Last night I was getting a kebab, and the Turkish owner told a African Uber Eats driver to never come back to his store. I don't know why. I didn't really understand why. I'm like, which one is the racist? I'm trying to figure out.
Well, I think, all right, let me get it. There was a Turkish?
Yeah.
So Turkish man, African man, white man.
Oh,
which one is the racist?
I must have projected,
you're the racist.
I must have projected.
You projected onto those poor innocent people.
I projected my subconscious racism onto them, and they started arguing with each other.
That's real powerful mojo, man.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, it's, I think in the old days they called that white man magic.
On racism, they're constantly redefining what racism is as well, and I think this is another way that they.
Oh, absolutely!
Another thing is to bump up the
redefining words is classic. Yes.
Yeah. My favorite example of this is that, like, when I was a kid, like, I got told, okay, racism is just like treating people badly because they're a different race to you. I'm like, yeah, okay, I can not do that. That's how I behave in my normal life. I treat everybody normally.
Yeah.
But then it was I think it was the mid 2000s. It was an Australia versus India cricket series, and Andrew Simons, who I think had Islander heritage.
All right.
I think I'm not quite sure what. There'd been a bit of trouble, like in the previous series when he was over in India, where Indians in the crowd were calling him a monkey.
Yeah.
And then in a match in 2005 at the mid 2000s at the SCG.
Well, it's in India, so maybe they were calling him a god.
It's quite possible.
Yeah.
Maybe that's, again, just, like he's going in there with this cultural prejudice.
Yeah.
And one of the Indian players said something to Andrew Simons on the field. And so Ricky Ponting, who was the captain, had been instructed very clearly by Cricket Australia that if he sees some kind of racism occurring on field, he must report it. So he reported it. And so then, of course, the Indians jumped up and down and said, well, that this is stupid because, like, you're Australian, we're Indians, and Indians can't be racist towards Australians. And that was basically the argument that was made. The argument was made that racism is based on power.
Yes.
And so in this case, it's the Australians who have
Indians
power.
Don't have any power in India.
No.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes. And so it's impossible for an Indian to racially abuse a brown-skinned Australian because he's Australian.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's a great. That was, for me, that was a real eye opener of, okay, this was a clear case of what anybody else, like, up until that point, like, this is what I understood racism to be. It's like, okay, that's not what racism is. It's this, what I thought was just like a far left fringe university idea is now mainstream. Yeah.
And it's interesting because it always started as, you can't hate someone just because of who they are, right? And in fact, that implied, and most people took it to mean, you could hate people if you actually had a reason, but you couldn't hate people if you didn't have a reason.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it became, you're not allowed to hate people.
Yes.
Well, actually, that's a pretty big difference right there.
Yeah, it is.
And then it became that certain people are more racist than others. Not individual people, but different ethnicities, races.
White people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, then it's just continued on.
Yes. Well, the definition of racism, from what I understand it now, like the idea that it's associated with power, and therefore white people have historical institutional power.
Yep.
Therefore, white people are just automatically racist.
Yep.
That definition of racist is racist.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's it. It's the term contradicts itself. And like when we look at why, again, if we go back to why the term racism was introduced, like
Yep.
it was used to undermine homogenous European countries, and it's doing it really, really well.
Well, it's providing a means by where common sense has no place.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, because everyone gets carried away sometimes. And you know, you say something to somebody and you don't, later on you think, oh, that was a bit mean, you know. And in a common sense society, you'd say, oh, I'll pull up a bit,
Yeah.
you know, I'll pay attention to that,
Yeah.
or I'll apologise to the
You might
person.
even say sorry. Yeah.
Right?
Genuine.
But now there's no reason to say sorry.
Mm.
So it actually encourages a corrosiveness within society.
Yeah.
Because there's no common sense.
Yes, absolutely. And every episode of perceived racism is now basically a catalyst for a new argument about what racism actually is and who's racist and what we should do about it. Like there's no, oh yeah, look, sorry, I messed up. Okay, no, fine, we'll move on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's no room for like giving each other a bit of lip. And you know, just having a little bit of a reverence and you know, building a bond that way either. It's as you say, utterly corrosive. Yeah.
And we keep seeing that over and over again. And I mean, it's at this point, I can't see it getting better. It's just going to get worse.
Yes. Well, I think it's designed
until
to
something
get worse.
changes. Yeah. And the interesting thing I always find is the government's silence on the issue.
Mm-hmm.
And the government will come out. The government supports things like the Human Rights Commissioner and so forth, and they have all these laws which aren't needed because they're actually covered by other laws. So, for example, 1975 we have the Anti-Racial Discrimination Act in Australia, and it basically says, hey, you can't discriminate against people because of their race. But you also can't abuse people because of their race. Well, actually, it was already against the law.
Yeah, right.
You know, you're not allowed to cause a ruckus in public. That's actually a crime.
Absolutely. You're not allowed to incite violence.
That's right. There's all these things that are already there that have been there for 100, 200, 300, 400 years.
Yes.
And then they say, oh no, they're not effective. They're not useful. But at the same time, they don't take them off the books.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So
one doesn't replace the other.
Exactly. One doesn't replace the other. One's just put on top of the other.
Yeah. So it's meant to elevate one group above another, essentially.
Yeah. Although also there's one area where I think we're doing better than Europe and the United States, and that's hate laws.
Oh yes.
We don't actually have hate laws in Australia.
Yeah. That's vital. I'm wondering, like, if we sort of segue to sort of Israel Folau, because Israel Folau is a rugby player who made the Instagram post talking about homosexuals going to hell.
Yeah. He talked about a lot of people going to hell, and homosexuals were one of them.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there were about 10 different categories.
Yeah. He basically went through all the deadly sins pretty much. Adulterers. Yeah. And so, yeah, he got sacked by Rugby Australia. He's now taking Rugby Australia to court to try to get his money back, to get compensation. Scott Morrison has stepped in and said, we need a new law to protect religious freedom.
Yeah.
Again, that's something where I'm like, we already have those laws. Surely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. We don't need new laws.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and again interesting. Like if we're talking about laws, it's like the Victorian government kind of accidentally put in protections for freedom of speech under Steve Bracks in 2006.
Yep.
They put in these protections like guaranteeing people's freedom of expression, whether in writing, whether in art, or a medium of their choosing. I think they meant it at the time. I think they meant it like for like left-wing activists to keep undermining our civilization, but that could actually turn around and bite them in the backside.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, like the fewer laws that we have, the better.
Yeah. Well, we've reached that point where we should finish up.
Absolutely.
Now, can you tell people where they can find you?
Absolutely. You'll find us. I think don't worry about coming to Facebook anymore. Facebook are becoming more and more obnoxious in their censorship. Just come straight to our website, www.xyz.net.au.
And you can find more of my thoughts at Upon Hope blog. Just put that into Google.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Been a real pleasure.
Thank you, mate.